Good afternoon. The subcommittee will come to order. Welcome to today's joint subcommittee on health and subcommittee on economic opportunity legislative hearing on draft legislation to improve the authority of the Secretary of Veteran Affairs to hire and retain physicians and other employees of the Department of Veteran Affairs. Thank you all for joining us here today. As I said before, providing a top-notch health care and benefits that our nation's veterans deserve is impossible without an equally top-notch workforce. VA's future depends on VA's ability to efficiently recruit and retain high-qualified and highly motivated professionals at all levels. Unfortunately, hiring remains a serious challenge across the department, a challenge that will only grow as VA's current staff gets older and increasingly eligible for retirement, and the private sector healthcare and benefits landscape gets increasingly competitive. The draft bill that we will be discussing this afternoon would simplify and shorten the VA's hiring process, strengthen VA's ability to bring the very best employees on board, and most importantly, ensure a robust workforce is available to serve our veterans for years to come. Contains a number of VA legislative proposals that would improve the department's ability to recruit and fairly compensate key leaders and grant schedule flexibility for critical medical personnel. It also contains other important provisions that would, among other things, increase training for VA human resources employees, create a centralized recruiting database to assist in identifying interested applicants for vacant positions, eliminate compensation panels that lengthen the hiring process for incoming physicians, and unnecessarily take existing providers away from direct patient care. And allow certain aspiring VA leaders to participate in the Executive Management Fellowship Program to gain valuable private sector experience that could be used to improve the VA's performance. I'm grateful to be here today with Dr. Wenstrup, the chairman of the Subcommittee on Economic Opportunity, to be working with him and other members of our two subcommittees on this very important issue. I thank you all for being here and now yield to Dr. Wenstrup for any opening statement he may have.
Well, thank you, Dr. Benishek, and good afternoon, and thank you to everyone with us here today. I'm looking forward to our discussion today as we've spent several months working on this proposal and listening to key stakeholders and holding a joint roundtable last December to begin the discussion on the language and to ensure we're doing this right. I know this committee has focused heavily on accountability, and while I think it is of the utmost importance, I think it's important that we also focus on the hiring and retention of high-quality employees within the department so that our veterans receive the best services possible. Last year, I made a commitment to several of our colleagues to also focus on improving the hiring process at VA, and I'm excited about the work that has been done to package some common sense provisions together. I would note that this is still a draft bill. Let me just say that again. This is still a draft bill, and I look forward to the feedback that we'll receive today so that we can make necessary changes to make the bill as close to perfect as possible. I do want to keep my comments short so we can get to our witnesses and their testimonies and questions. But before I yield back to Dr. Benishek, I do want to make a couple of comments about the testimony and views VA provided to us today, which I have to say are somewhat minimal at best at this time. I'm disappointed that the department was unable to provide views or comment on a majority of the provisions that are in this bill. We want your opinion. And I understand that we only gave VA a couple weeks notice about this hearing, and I know the OMB bureaucratic process is not known to be speedy, but this is not the first time the department has seen this bill or a version of this bill, as a draft was provided to VA last November in preparation for our roundtable in December. So I do hope to hear more from VA on these issues because we need your input. And with that, I yield back.
Thank you, Dr. Wenstrup. I'll now yield to Ms. Brownlee, ranking member of the Subcommittee on Health, for any opening statement she may have.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I want to thank you and Chairman Wenstrup for holding this hearing today. I'd also like to thank the witnesses here today who have joined us to provide their expert views on the discussion draft we have before us. This draft legislation is another step forward in revising hiring practices at the Department of Veteran Affairs. As with any legislation, as Mr. Winthrop said, we should make every attempt to scrutinize the provisions and understand the unintended consequences that may arise from good intentions contained in the bill. This draft includes many common sense provisions, including setting competitive pay levels for medical center and network directors, and ensuring that emergency room doctors and staff have the scheduling flexibility needed to provide quality services when they are needed. I support the effort to institute competitive pay for VA medical center directors. The West Los Angeles VA Medical Center, which serves my veterans in my county and Ventura County, recently hired its first permanent director in more than 2 years. I believe that making medical center director salaries more comparable with market rates would go a long way towards attracting and keeping the most qualified candidates and filling the leadership vacuum that exists in many of the veteran integrated service networks. I appreciate the concerns many of the witnesses have brought to our attention in their submitted testimony. I also have some concerns about the draft bill. In particular, I hope that we can work to come to an agreement, particularly on Section 9, which modifies the existing veterans hiring preference. I would like to understand the pros and cons of this section better, so as we move forward, we are not putting the VA at a disadvantage when competing for executive talent with other agencies and the private sector. I look forward to hearing from our guests today on their thoughts on improving the system, and again, I thank both the chairmen for calling this hearing.
Thank you very much. I'll now yield to Mr. Takano, the ranking member of the Subcommittee on Economic Opportunity, for any opening statement that he may have. Mr. Takano?
Thank you to both chairmen for holding this hearing. Thank you, Chairman Benishek. Over the past 3 years, the Veterans Affairs Committee has worked hard to reform the VA, particularly as it involves the delivery of health care by the Veterans Health Administration. During this time, we have focused much of our discussion and our disagreements on how easy we should make it for the VA to fire employees. We've also focused on the important role of VA whistleblowers and how we can best protect them from retaliation. Today, we have the opportunity to discuss another important element of employment at the VA, a draft bill that seeks to improve VA's ability to attract, hire, and retain the best employees and providers. The draft legislation is a good starting point. I'm encouraged by common sense solutions such as granting VA providers the flexibility to work more or less 80 hours per biweekly work period. I want to thank my colleague, Dr. Ruiz, for introducing this idea. Thank you, Dr. Ruiz. I also support, you had a great idea, this 80 hours per biweekly work period. I also strongly support incentivizing more student veterans to pursue graduate medical education programs and mental health fields, and hope we can do more to encourage graduates to work at the VA. I want to ensure we do not dilute veterans' preference or cut out valuable HR procedures for the sake of efficiency. But today, I plan to listen to the hopefully robust discussion on these sensitive topics. So again, I thank the chairman for bringing this bill to us to discuss and improve before it is introduced. I thank you also to the VSOs, the VA, and other representatives who have come to join in this discussion. I look forward to hearing how we can help VA improve its hiring policies. Thank you, and I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Takano. Joining us on our first and only panel is Max Stier, the President and Chief Executive Officer of the Partnership for Public Service, Mr. Roscoe Butler, the Deputy Director of Healthcare for the National Veterans Affairs and Rehabilitation Division of the American Legion, Carlos Fuentes, Senior Legislative Associate for the Veterans of Foreign Wars of the United States, and Dr. Carolyn Clancy, the Deputy Undersecretary for Health for Organizational Excellence for the Veterans Health Administration of the U.S. Department of Veteran Affairs, accompanied by Elias Hernandez, the Chief Officer for Workforce Management and Consulting. Thank you all for being here this afternoon. Mr. Steer, we'll begin with you. Please proceed with your testimony. You have 5 minutes.
Very much for holding this hearing and for the work you've done here. The problems that you're addressing are actually problems that face the entire government, but I would say that you are the best committee on trying to address them, so kudos to you. And secondly, I wanted to thank you for the great work you've done with your own staffs, because they've been exceptional to work with, and that obviously is critical for you and for the legislation, bluntly for the country. This is an incredibly important issue. 3 facts that stand out in relief for me. One of them is the limited demographic diversity that exists at the VA. So in 2015, it was only 2/3 of 1% of VA's workforce is under the age of 25. So think about that, 2/3 of 1%. And it's only 5.35% that's under the age of 30. So that's one devastating fact. Second, only around 0.5% of new hires since 2012 have been under the Pathways program, which is the primary way that agencies are supposed to be hiring either student interns or recent college graduates. And then a third devastating fact, a recent study that I saw last week showed that ratings among government agencies on the statement, "My agency is unable to recruit the best employees," VA and its components were at or near the top on answering that question. So that's the backdrop for the work that you're doing here. It is so important. 3 areas that I think you're really doing important work on this bill. One obviously involves the talent itself. A couple of things that are powerful, and you've heard in some of the opening statements that you made, obviously supporting market pay for your medical directors, really clearly very important. You're not going to get the talent that you need in that area unless you do that. We would argue the partnership that the pay system more generally in the federal workforce is broken. It was built in 1949. It's all about internal equity when you had a clerical workforce. The whole thing should be based on market compensation in a world in which for the professionals, that's the way we got to compete for talent. That may mean some folks are paid more, some folks less, but that's the right way to do it, but you're going in the right direction with that. Secondly, you improve that Pathways program, the program that gets student interns and new college graduates in very important ways, and that's going to be very important to do. One thing I would add is you've got to encourage the VA to actually use the authority, and I'll come back to this. The legislation is a starter pistol. It's not at the end of the day. You're giving them tools, but I hope you'll do oversight to make sure that they use the authority you're providing them. On data, you can't manage what you don't measure. I think you're in this bill, you're requiring a number of data points to be collected around hiring effectiveness. Will give you real insight into whether VA is doing its job well, and that's critically important. And then on leadership accountability, the idea of holding the political appointees to the same standards as the careers is absolutely essential. Across government, you have political appointees, 4,000 of them, fewer obviously in VA, but you don't have the normal line of sight for the career people that stacks up their performance plans against the objectives of the organization. Starts with the leadership. You need clarity about what they're trying to achieve, how they're being held accountable, and then it cascades into the rest of the organization. So that's really important. 3 things that I think you could do better with this bill. One, for the passport idea, it seems to me that the reemployment of former employees is extremely important. Right now, there's an authority to, you're allowing it for only 1 grade increase. I would suggest that that's an unnecessary restriction. Someone spends time in the VA or some other agency, which is the other piece of this, they ought to be able to come back if they've developed skills that they can then bring back to the organization more than just 1 grade up. Secondly, I'm basically troubled by the expansion of veterans' preference to the SES. Veterans' preference is incredibly important. However, in the context of what the VA is dealing with right now with SES, it's a troubled place. They can't recruit people in right now. Now's not the time to make it more difficult. There are other things that could be done that I think would be more powerful and less concerning. And third, on the Executive Management Fellowship Program, the cap needs to be raised from 30. Right now, you have over 7,000, by our count, eligible participants. 30 just doesn't make any real difference. Question has arisen, well, if you got a challenge for getting talent in, do you really want to send your people out? The answer is yes. You want to grow and develop your people. You'll retain your talent better if you do it. And bluntly, we think it should be a 2-way program. So you can bring folks from the private sector in, and that will also help you get great talent and refresh the workforce, which is so important. So last issue, this is not just about the legislation, as I mentioned. It's about the enablers. Your oversight is going to be absolutely essential to make sure that the VA is doing the work that it needs to do, and these provisions need to be funded. Happy to answer questions as fast as I can talk. Thank you.
Good job, Mr. Steer, in talking fast.
I should say I am Steyer, and it's pronounced, if you look
Steyer.
at it, it looks like Steer. Anyone who says Steyer ordinarily, you're like, you don't know how to pronounce words, but parents decide pronunciation, so what can I do? So it's Steyer.
No, that's fine, great, perfect. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mr. Butler, I'll recognize you now for 5 minutes.
Thank you. For nearly 2 decades now, the American Legion has been expressing concerns about staffing shortages for physicians and medical specialists in the VA. We've seen this because we've been there as part of our ongoing System Worth Saving Task Force visits that evaluate VA healthcare in every visit, from rural to urban, and we've tried to make sure VA is fully staffed to provide high-quality, efficient care tailored to meet the needs of local veterans. Chairman Benishek, Winstrup, Ranking Member Brownlee, Takano, and distinguished members of the Subcommittee on Health and Economic Opportunity, on behalf of National Commander Dale Burnett and the American Legion, and the country's largest patriotic wartime service organization for veterans, comprising of over 2 million members and serving every man and woman who have worn the uniform for this country, we thank you for the opportunity to testify regarding the draft legislation regarding improving the authority for the Secretary of Veterans Affairs to hire and retain physicians and other employees of the department. As reflected in our written testimony and through the eyes of the American Legion System Worth Saving program, which I frequently participate in, we have tracked and reported staffing shortages in every VA healthcare system across the country. We see the staffing shortages throughout VA, and we feel it is getting worse than improving. The American Legion System Worth Saving 2014 Executive Summary found that several VA medical centers continue to struggle to fill critical leadership positions across multiple departments. These gaps have caused communication breakdowns between medical center leadership and staff that work within these departments. Therefore, for the reason outlined in our written testimony, the American Legion fully supports Section 2, 3, 4, 5, 8, 9, 11, 14, and 15 of the draft legislation to improve hiring practices at the Department of Veterans Affairs. However, Section 7 gives us great concerns. As it currently stands, VA has over half of their critical leadership positions either unfilled or filled by individuals on an interim basis. Sending a portion of the workforce out of VA every year would only exacerbate this situation. If VA can afford to lose those personnel for either a year, then we believe that VA may not need those positions to be filled. The American Legion would rather see VA fill the positions than have and ensure there is a full workforce available to treat the needs of veterans. Therefore, for this reason, the American Legion opposed Section 7, which would create within VA an executive management fellowship program. There are plenty other sections of this legislation that offers improvements to delivery of VA health care. Section 3 offers a fix to a problem. The American Legion has long sought a solution to adjusting federal work guidelines to fix the unusual hours necessary to staff emergency rooms. Other section addresses fixes to how VA determine market values to stay competitive for health care and hiring, how VA evaluates which portions are highest needed, and attempt to further refine the accountability process for VA employees. Any of these measures should contribute immediately, immeasurably toward improving VA, and these are measures that should be moved forward with the passage of this legislation. Again, on behalf of our National Commander, Dale Burnett, and the millions of dedicated veterans that comprise the nation's largest veteran service organization, we thank you for having the opportunity to speak today. I would be happy to answer any of the committee's questions. And again, thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Butler. Mr. Fuentes, you're now recognized for 5 minutes.
On behalf of the men and women of the VFW and our auxiliaries, I would like to thank you for the opportunity to present our views on ways VA can improve recruitment, retention, and of high-quality healthcare professionals and other employees. The VFW thanks you for recognizing that VA's ability to hire and retain high-quality employees is equally as important as its ability to fire and demote employees who put veterans at risk. The VFW agrees with many of the ideas included in the draft legislation being discussed today. However, we would like to share an idea that we hope the subcommittees will consider. During our site visits of VA medical facilities, the VFW has noticed one constant struggle: hiring and retaining entry-level clerks who help with answering phones, greeting patients, scheduling appointments, and other administrative tasks. During our visits, we often hear from providers and facility leadership say that the lack of administrative support limits their ability to deliver health care to veterans. This issue must be addressed by authorizing VA to quickly fill high turnover positions at VA medical facilities. Similar to VA medical facilities, the VA canteen service relies on entry-level employees to operate and maintain its services. However, the canteen service is exempt from certain Title V competitive service requirements to ensure high turnover does not impact its ability to operate retail stores, cafes, and other quality-of-life programs in VA medical facilities around the country. The VFW urges Congress to consider extending these authorities to VHA to quickly fill high turnover vacancies. The VFW supports most sections of the discussion draft being considered today, which takes a multifaceted approach towards expanding VA's authorities to hire and retain high-quality employees. In the interest of time, I would like to comment on two sections we believe can be improved. The VFW opposes Section 4, which would expand VA's Yellow Ribbon program to require VA to help veterans cover the cost of advanced degrees in mental health. The VFW supports efforts to provide additional assistance for veterans who choose to advance their careers and assist their fellow veterans by obtaining advanced degrees in mental health. However, we do not believe that amending the Yellow Ribbon program is the best option to do so. The Yellow Ribbon program was established to supplement the post-9/11 GI Bill by authorizing VA to enter into agreements with educational institutions to cover up to 50% of the gap between the cost of tuition and fees associated with degree programs and the statutory caps. The VFW is concerned that this legislation fails to ensure veterans have enough post-9/11 GI Bill eligibility to complete their advanced degrees in mental health. For example, veterans who use their post-9/11 GI Bill to obtain a bachelor's degree and would like to participate in this program are unlikely to have enough eligibility remaining to complete an advanced degree in mental health. The VFW is a strong proponent of public-private partnerships, but believes that the program would be better suited under VA's Health Professionals Education Assistance Program. Section 9 would require VA to comply with certain Title V competitive service requirements when hiring SES employees. While the VFW supports applying veterans' preference when hiring VA SES employees, we feel that Congress must streamline, not impede, VA's ability to hire qualified executives. That is why we recommend that the subcommittees exempt VA SES employment process from Title V competitive service requirements. To ensure VA hires qualified veterans as senior executives, Congress should require VA to properly consider veterans when hiring SES employees, regardless of which authority or hiring authority they use. Mr. Chairman, this concludes my testimony. I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Fuentes. Dr. Clancy, you may proceed with your testimony.
Good afternoon, Chairman Banashek, Chairman Wenstrup, Ranking Member Brownlee, Ranking Member Chicano, and members of the committee. Thank you for inviting us here today to present our views on the draft bill to improve the authority of the Secretary of Veterans Affairs to hire and retain physicians and other employees. Joining me today is Elias Hernandez, the Chief Officer for Workforce Management and Consulting, Tia Butler, who's sitting behind me, the Executive Director of the Corporate Senior Executive Management Office, and Kimberly McLeod, Associate Chief Counsel. First, we want to thank the subcommittees for including 3 of our legislative proposals in the draft legislation. These will give us the necessary resources to meet the department's obligation to provide timely, quality health care and benefits to our veterans. We're happy to support several sections of the proposed bill, including Section 2, which matches a proposal put forward last year in VA's 2017 budget submission. VA believes that there are primary factors that warrant a separate compensation system for medical center directors and visitor network directors, which are detailed in the written testimony. VA requests, however, that the section stating that medical center director and network directors be a qualified doctor of any kind be removed from the bill. It is already difficult to recruit for these positions, and this additional restriction would make it nearly impossible to recruit in some areas. Moreover, running a hospital is an inherently complex skill set, requiring a diverse background, including skills needed to manage anything from a multi-million-dollar budget facility and staffing operations and so forth. Physicians may or may not have these skills, and there are other graduate programs that do give people this kind of training. And in fact, we have a fellowship program for people who graduate from Masters of Health Administration programs. Section 3 of the proposed bill would allow VA to arrange flexible physician and physician assistant work schedules to allow for the hiring and full implementation of a hospitalist physician system and to accommodate the unusual work schedule requirements for emergency medicine physicians. Thank you, Dr. Ruiz. VA supports this increased flexibility for critical medical personnel. Hospitalists and emergency medicine physicians specialize in the care of patients in the hospital, often working irregular work schedules to accommodate the need for efficient hospital care. And we believe that increased scheduling flexibility would align our practices with the private sectors, which would facilitate the recruitment and retention of emergency physicians, as well as the operation of a hospitalist physician system at all VA medical centers. Section 4 of the bill would amend Title 38 to prohibit the use of transferred entitlement under the public-private contributions. VA supports legislation that would provide training and employment opportunities for veterans. However, the department has some concerns with this section of the bill. VA is not certain a change in the way VA and institutions of higher learning share contributions for specific degrees and programs would be beneficial. Under its current structure, the Yellow Ribbon Program is a remarkably successful program with nearly 2,000 participating institutions. For VA to support this bill, each of the professions listed that has educational and licensure requirements would need to have a corresponding provision that would state that the program meets the educational requirements defined by VA qualification standards. As for the report required in Section 5, we defer to the Office of Inspector General on how they would process this report. VA supports Section 6, which would eliminate the compensation panel recommendation process. This section is also similar to another proposal put forward in February 2016 in VA's 2017 budget submission. The compensation panel process is time-consuming and adds little value as medical center directors and other approving officials already have the final authority to approve the rate of pay. This process also contributes to a delay in hiring, which is probably our greatest concern. It would be more cost-effective and efficient to allow a selecting official and to recommend the appropriate salary for prospective employees and eliminate this compensation panel process. We very much look forward to working with the committees and our agency partners to finalize language on these provisions. The remaining sections will be discussed in a follow-up views letter that is currently being drafted, and we will forward these remaining views and costs to you expeditiously. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for this opportunity to present our views on this draft bill, and my colleagues and I are happy to respond to any questions you or other members might have.
Thank you, Dr. Clancy. I really appreciate your answers there. I yield myself 5 minutes for questions, and frankly, I was kind of excited to have this hearing because it's a lot of important issues. I think the roundtable really got us a lot of input, and this is basically the next step. Dr. Clancy, I agree with you that this compensation panel doesn't make a lot of sense to me because a physician who's about to be hired is going to certainly shop around to see what other people are offering, and it doesn't make sense. But what I'd like to know is what else can we do besides this to speed up the process? I mean, I've heard that it takes up to a year to hire somebody, a physician in particular, physicians in particular at the VA. So besides a central database, for finding people looking for work, and this process here, what other processes could we do? And maybe Mr. Steyer would like to comment on that too. So let's start with Mr. Steyer, then I'll give you an opportunity too, Dr. Clancy. Mr. Steyer, what else should we be doing to make this process quicker?
Well, part of it, I think, is that you already have in the bill. It's going to be really important to have good information. And so my bet is there's a high degree of variability across the system as to who's hiring fast and who's not, and what the experience is like for the potential applicants to the positions. And so collecting information about who is actually doing it well, making that something that is available across the whole network of VA facilities, I think will help you identify what are the best practices that ought to be adopted more generally. What you're doing here, I think, is very important, but I really do believe it truly is just the starter's pistol. And at the end of the day, ensuring that these authorities are used effectively, that the execution of the tasks that you're trying to facilitate actually happens effectively.
Have to be measured as they go.
Correct. They need to be measured, and they need to identify, again, where certain components are doing it well so that they become the model for best practice across the whole organization. I'm confident that if you explored, you used a year figure, you would find organizations within the VA system that are actually doing it really, really well, best in class. Question is, what are they doing, and why isn't everyone else doing it, and how do you get them to do that?
Dr. Clancy, let me ask you this and follow up of what Mr. Steyer was saying. Do people who are interviewed for positions, are they given an opportunity to comment on the process? You collect that data at all?
We collect exit interview data when people leave. I'm not sure about
But
the
when
front
you're
end.
hiring, do you interview the people that you're hiring to
Mr.
comment
Hernandez?
on the process, perhaps in an anonymous way, so that they can give comments on the process?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, we do collect information in terms of the interview process. However, that information is obviously not released to anyone other than the hiring official. But what I would like to say is that I fully agree with everything that's been said here today, and I would like to share some information regarding, some of the improvement we have made in the hiring process, in particular for the physicians and nurses. And this bill that has been introduced is also going to help us do even better in the hiring process. We do track the hiring process in terms of the speed of hire, and we have a measure in the organization where all the hiring actions must occur within 60 days. 80% of those actions must occur within 60 days. The recent data that we collected, in FY 2015 and so far this year.
I guess I don't understand now. 60 days? You're saying the hiring process is 60 days? Now, that's
Mr. Chairman,
contrary to the most of the information that I've ever heard. I mean, most of the time, people tell me it takes months.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, that's what if I may, that's what I'm trying to convey. That we still have issues, and I'll tell you what those issues are shortly. So we collect the data and we measure the hiring process in the different stages of the process. And right now we are about 78% of all the hires that have taken place in FY 2015 have been met within 60 days. However, that measure only measures from the beginning of the process to a tentative job offer. Okay, what happens after the tentative job offer is the information that we are really keying in. As an example, the physicians, we can give them a tentative job offer based on the data that we collected within 96 days. However, it takes an additional 32 days to bring them on board. So it's a lot of factors associated with that in terms of, scope of practice, them being able to kind of close their scope of practice in the previous organization going into the new organization, and also the credentialing process, which, by the way, VHA has made major improvements in that area, where we are right now averaging about 35 days for some of those credentialing processes, which is a whole lot better than what it is in the private sector of 45 days. The challenges that we have.
I guess I mean, that sounds like really great numbers, but that's just not the way it is from what I've been talking to people. Okay, so I mean, I talk to people, and that's just not the numbers that you submit here. 60 days and 90 days, isn't it? But I'm out of time. I'm going to yield to Dr. Wenstrup.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Butler, the American Legion's written statement mentioned some of the challenges the VA faces attempting to recruit and retain medical staff in rural areas, and I know that's difficult in parts of my district as well. But do you believe that this bill that we're considering could improve the recruitment and retention in rural areas? And if it's not able to, what would you suggest maybe that we add to the bill to try and improve that?
Well, I think there are good components, excellent components within the bill that will enhance VA's existing or current authority and give facility leadership the ability to hire employees more quickly. I was out on a recent visit in Reno, Nevada last week, and in response to the chairman's question, what I heard there are certain hard-to-fill positions, audiologists, that it's taking years to fill those positions, not necessarily because because they don't have the locations and the disciplines, the teaching facilities. They don't have the source where people are interested in coming to, like Nevada, for those positions. And then they're competing with private industry. So I think that you have to build a program where it's on the same level that the private industry program is, and it has the same similar metrics so that it's more attractive to outside providers when they're considering the VA. If they look at the outside community hospital versus the VA, it's much easier for them, higher pay and other things that drive them, that they'll choose the community hospital over the VA. And I think from what we're seeing that it takes a special breed of doctor to work for the VA. They really have to be committed, and they have to have that mentality of caring for veterans. And not all doctors, I say, have that same mentality. Some people, drivers are the money that they would make, but I think that the doctors that really choose to work for the VA choose it for different reasons other than money. And so I think that, you have to take all of those factors into consideration and then build a program that is much competitive with the private community.
Thank you. Dr. Clancy, on that same vein, are there barriers that Congress could break down to make it easier in the rural communities for recruitment and retention?
So I appreciate my colleagues' comments very much from the American Legion. I will say, I think all of U.S. healthcare is struggling with how do you get people to come to rural areas. In fact, I saw something recently, I didn't see the backup detail, that claimed that physicians with higher educated spouses were harder to recruit to rural areas. If there's one area where our system would have a bit of a barrier, and I'm at a loss for how you all could help, although I'd be happy to be surprised. A private sector hospital could actually be helping to get, for the spouse to get a position, other opportunities and so forth, and that we are hiring for that one position, right? So that's about the only thing I can think that would be helpful. It's very clear to us that expanding our footprint in telehealth and other kinds of virtual care is going to be hugely important to our efforts in rural areas. But happy to work with you on other ideas.
Well, one thought that I have in that vein is, you're talking about small communities are having the same problem that VA is having. I mean, if both entities are looking for one type of specialist, there should be ways to start thinking about collaborating.
I think that's a great idea.
To the area. That I give back.
Ms. Brownlee, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think just following up a little bit on this line of questioning, I just had a general question and would appreciate a short answer if it's possible. But if we get to the consolidation of non-VA care and that program, how would that affect really the number of employees needed for veterans health care within the VA, if that makes sense?
It makes perfect sense. I'm very optimistic that we will indeed, with your help, get to the consolidation of all paths to community care. And I think the answer to your question is going to depend on the part of the country that you're talking about. And the issue is going to be less about numbers of VA physicians and more about the distribution by specialty. But I don't believe that we have got a very clear-cut analysis on that, but would be happy to get back to you with more information.
Do you intend on doing some kind of analysis? Because I think it would be helpful in terms of what we're looking at here. I think it would also be helpful in terms of moving forward, in terms of good selling points, if you will, towards consolidation of these programs, which I think is important. So
I don't know actually if it's on the list yet, but it is now.
okay.
And obviously, making that consolidation and integration happen is going to be key, but happy to take that back.
Okay. We've just kind of gone through really, as I mentioned in my opening remarks, a 2-year space of time where we haven't had a permanent director of the West LA Medical Center. We finally do now. We're very happy that we do. But
We are too.
it's been a long road. And so I just wanted you to comment a little bit on succession plans and how they're being conducted at the VA, and are they being conducted, across services and across the country.
It is a standing practice that our facilities and our networks actually have a regular cycle of succession planning. As Mr. Steyer alluded to earlier, I'm quite confident that there's some variability. I haven't taken a very close eye on all of those, but that has long been a standard practice for all of our facilities.
It is, you're sure that it's a standard practice across the country?
Yes.
Across centers?
Now, the extent to which the crisis and many of our vacancies have, cut that off or interrupted it in the recent past year or two, I don't know, but I'd be happy to have someone take a look at that and get back to you. But I will tell you, people take this very, very seriously.
Thank you very much. And in terms of Mr. Steyer's opening comments, too, with regards to demographics within the VA population, I mean, what are the challenges that you're facing in attracting particularly younger employees?
Well, understand that except for truly exceptional people, attracting doctors is going to be getting to the upper end by the time you finish training of the category that Mr. Steyer was referring to. My understanding is that over the recent years, there's been a little bit of a downturn among an interest among younger people in working for government writ large. Whether that affects VA more than other departments, I don't have good information about. I will say our Assistant Secretary for HR&A is constantly talking about the Pathways Initiative, and some parts of the department use that quite a bit. We can certainly take it back to see if the Veterans Health System might be using it more vigorously.
I mean, are we tracking that information in any way?
Yes.
So we understand
Yeah.
where the problems and challenges are?
Yes.
In terms of this proposed legislation, do you have a time frame of when we might hear written views on the sections that aren't included in the testimony today?
I can assure you that literally people are working on this right now, and we will get it to you as quickly as we can.
Okay. And last and finally, on the area on Section 9 that you were, again, I understand that you weren't able to provide your views on Section 9 today, which would expand the eligibility for veterans preference in the federal hiring process to both National Guards and reservists who serve 180 cumulative days on active duty as opposed to 180 consecutive days. And I think as a federal agency, VA would clearly benefit from hiring more guards and reservists. Is there a concern that expanding eligibility would dilute the veterans' preference to the point of requiring veterans to compete against each other for federal jobs?
I'm going to ask my colleague, Ms. Butler, if she has more information on
Well,
that.
it looks like I've run out of time, so,
We will follow up.
okay,
Can we take that for the record?
thank you. I yield back.
Mr. Tucano? You're recognized.
That question is something I'm interested in hearing the VA's answer, so I'll take that question up, Ms. Brownlee.
Great.
So go ahead.
All right. Elias, do you want to take that?
My humble opinion in that particular section is that, our organization strive for hiring veterans. We have hiring initiatives in our organization to hire more veterans. It's something that we probably have to kind of look at it a little bit more closely in terms of the impact. Like I say, my personal opinion is that, the more veterans that are eligible for our jobs, the greater the opportunities for our organization to be able to hire them.
Well, I'll just give this input. I represent an Air Reserve base where we have reservists, both reservists and guardsmen, and it's always difficult for them to find a flexible enough employer which will enable them to also do their reservist duties. But I understand that, and so I appreciate that you're going to review the impact it would have on the VA and whether or not it would be good or bad. But I understand the VFW has some concerns about this. And Mr. Fuentes, would you care to comment on what your concerns are about this provision?
Just to clarify our position, we support the change from cumulative, the change for Guard and Reserve. We support that section.
Oh, good.
What we have concerns with is the change that would require VA to comply with certain Title V competitive service legislation or law, okay, right? And that was done because the intent of the legislation, my understanding is, so that veteran preference is opened up to retired veterans, right? Retirees, military retirees. So these are the folks, the officers who served 20 years, who would make great executives, who aren't extended veterans preference at the moment. But we don't, it's not that we believe that they shouldn't have veterans preference, is that we feel that by trying to do something good, I think you're actually impeding VA's ability to hire more expeditiously, because you're now requiring them to comply with Title V restrictions. I don't know if that makes sense.
I'm not quite understanding. We'll explore this a little further, but I'm glad to hear that you've clarified the 180-day consecutive service. So you're not opposing that. You're saying that you don't have an objection to that.
Not at all. Our written testimony goes into how we believe that, just our all-volunteer military and the way we've been fighting last 2 wars in Iraq and Afghanistan makes sense for that we make this change.
Yeah,
so we support this change.
Our reservists and guards, our service members in the Guard, I think would feel that this would treat them with respect, that we also give them a hiring preference.
Congressman, if I may, I'm a reservist, and former reservist and Afghanistan veteran, so I completely understand how this would impact my fellow veterans.
It would have a great impact, I think, on our ability to help our guardsmen find employment that sort of is harmonious with what they're also doing. The retiree issue, though, I have another minute left, but help me understand this a little better, because I thought that maybe your objection might be that we have people who haven't reached the 20-year retiree level. I mean, I'm thinking that the military retirees may be in a better place than our veterans with shorter service, that they might be younger, and that it puts them at a disadvantage. Go ahead.
We completely agree that I think that military retirees and officers who've served 20 years or more make excellent candidates for executives at VA. I think it's the vehicle that's utilized to make that happen that we have concerns with.
All right, let's try to talk a little more about that offline and try to understand. It seems a little more subtle. So I didn't hear the Title V complications. So, but I'm glad to hear about your support of the 180-day consecutive or non-consecutive. But you're not. Just be clear. The 20 days cumulative versus consecutive, you are in favor of. Or
yes,
you support.
We support that aspect of the section, and this section has a number of provisions, and that one is one that we support.
Okay. Well, great. Thank you for your testimony.
Dr. Rowe, you're recognized.
Thank you, Dr. Benishek, and thank you all panelists for being here today. It's been a good discussion, I think, and one that needs to be had. First of all, I want to just say for the record that to me, a veteran is a veteran. If I didn't know you'd served in the reserves, could care less, or the Guard. I was active duty. To me, it doesn't matter. You served, and what I tell everybody, the military ain't Club Med. They send you where they send you, where they need you. And so whether it's 180 consecutive days, 14 days in the summer, and you never get deployed, you put yourself out there to be deployed if you need to be. And to me, that's service. So I want to get that on the record, and want you to know that I'm going to support that type of legislation or whatever going forward, because I feel like you're a brother just like I am. Now, a couple things, I guess, Dr. Clancy, that we're looking at concern about the VA's request to remove the VISN medical center directors to be doctors, or I would say other medical providers on the ground. That it's already difficult to recruit for these positions, and this additional restriction will make it nearly impossible in some areas. And then what data do you have to back up the assertion that you think that medical expertise is unnecessary when recruiting a professional to lead a hospital or a group of hospitals? Let me give you an example. I don't have an MBA from Harvard in business, but I have an MBA from paying bills for 30 years and running a practice and managing people and helping manage a very large organization. So when you look at that, you just like in the reservists and Guard, they have that military experience, but they also have a civilian experience. It's very valuable when they go in the military. They may be accountants, they may be mechanics, they may be managers of a Walmart, whatever. They bring those skills with them. And those are valuable leadership skills. And it's just exactly like I don't have a master's in public health from somewhere, but I have decades of real-world experience that would be valuable in running a hospital, because I can promise you, I know exactly how an OR works. I know exactly how a medical floor works. I know exactly how the laundry works, and especially when it doesn't work, and especially when you don't get your instruments sterilized and so on, that a person that's never walked in those shoes wouldn't know. So how many of our directors, either VISN or otherwise, our medical center directors, are medically trained people? Nurse practitioner, doctor, pharmacist, whatever.
I'd have to take that for the record, and I take your comment very, very seriously. Some of our best medical center and network directors have been physicians. Some of them are now.
Yeah, it doesn't mean you wouldn't.
My only point was, just as you got an MBA in paying bills, I'm going to guess that you had colleagues who probably failed that course, or who struggled much more to run the business that running a practice requires. My only point was that there is expertise in other areas.
No
that's
question,
quite
that's
important.
I mean, I totally agree with you there. It's not because you do practice doesn't mean you ran one.
Yeah.
And I think that's exactly right. But I think you should look. I do think that those providers have a different set of lenses that they look through. And the reason they do, I think, is they will always look through it, as you will, Dr. Clancy, through the eyes of how everything I do affects a patient.
Yeah.
And the care they get every day. Does it make it better and easier for the people providing the care? If you've been down there actually doing it yourself, and you do understand it. So I leave it with that. I wonder if the staffing, and the other question I have is, do you know what the demographics are of the 340-something thousand slots that you have, or the employees you have at the VA, what their ages are? Because if you're like a lot of them, I know Eastman Chemicals, a large company in my district, I think in the next 5 years, 25% of their labor force can retire, and they don't know what they're going to do. I mean, they're trying to train. People are now working longer, thank goodness they are. And one of the reasons I think that there's not a very, as you pointed out just a minute ago, the very young, Mr. Steer, is that it does take us a while to get trained up. If somebody that has as many, I tried as fast as I could to learn it, but it's just a lot to learn, and it takes you a lot of years to do it. And I think that's one of the things. And the other thing I think is, I wonder if this is generational. You see people, younger people tend to turn what they're doing over a lot more frequently than people in my generation who got a job at the plant and worked there for 40 years and retired. I wonder if it's that also. It's a challenge for everybody, not just the VA, is my point. you
I will
seeing that?
simply say we'd be happy to give you specific numbers on what the age breakdown is. The issue of how many people are retirement eligible is something that we watch a lot. As you say, many people, for a variety of reasons, have deferred that decision, or in contrast to previous years, but it's something we keep a close eye on, and I'm going to guess Mr. Steyer and his colleagues do as well.
Yeah, we know that 10,000 people turn 65 today.
Yeah.
But, I mean, that's just a fact.
I mean, there's no question that the retirement issue is a very prominent one, and I think it's really important to look at the mission-critical pieces of VA and not just the whole thing. But in general, VA has, and it's not just the medical directors, it's not bringing in very many young people. It's not the medical directors or the doctors themselves. It's not hiring them in any real number. Some of that has to do, again, just on the pathway side. They're not doing what any other professional organization does, and this is true across government, of taking people in as student interns, seeing if they actually work out, and then converting them to full-time employees if they work right. That's not a model that's used in government more generally or at VA. And it's a big mistake because you can look at time to hire, which is the question we were discussing, but you really want to look at quality of hire. You want to look at the assessment, and there's no substitute for having an opportunity to work with somebody. So again, government and VA in particular is not doing the most basic thing of seeing student interns as the primary hiring entry point. And that's something that could be done. You're going to improve the situation with the bill, but fundamentally that's going to be a management exercise on the part of the VA.
I'm sorry, Mr. I didn't mean to go over, but I agree with you 100% that 4 of the 7 members of my staff here in Washington, D.C. came in as basically as interns, entry-level jobs, and they're great.
And you hired the ones that made sense.
Thanks, Dr. Rowe. Mr. O'Rourke, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to thank you and Chairman Winstrup for your work and the work of other committee members on this draft legislation and the work of your staffs and the minority staff as well. This is, I think, one of the most critical issues for us to be working on, and I appreciate the feedback from the VSOs and Mr. Steyer and the VA on this. And whatever imperfections or improvements that can be made, let's get to them as quickly as possible. And I hope that the VA, and it sounds like from some of your comments, Dr. Clancy, you are, I hope the VA will run with the spirit of this, and whatever you can do administratively now, do it. Don't need to wait for legislation from Congress to do so. Last summer, we learned that there were 41,500 medical positions authorized, appropriated for, but unfilled at the VA. What is that number today?
Congressman O'Rourke, we do have the number of requirements that have been initiated in WebHR. We don't have a precise number of vacancies due to the fact that we don't have a position management system in the organization, but the number is currently 43,000 positions. And out of those, 37,176 are actually on the active recruitment phase.
Okay, so if, I'll just take from your answer, if we were at 41.5, we're now at 43. Okay, so we're having a really hard time, not even treading water, but just not sinking altogether. How many of those 43,000 are behavioral or mental health positions?
I have the numbers here. Let me just find it real quickly. There are 3,497 physicians, close to 9,000 nurses. I have some specific numbers related to mental health, which will, there are psychiatric, there are about 3,200 of those positions. Well, let me rephrase that back. There are 3,216 on board psychiatric. There are 275 actions in the WebHR system being recruited.
How many psychiatrists are you short?
I don't have that specific data in front of me, Congressman O'Rourke.
So this is a request I've made of the Secretary already, and I'll make it again through you, Dr. Clancy. I know the Secretary has a 12-point program to turn around the VA. I will again submit it should be a 13-point program, and point number 1 should be reduce veteran suicide. If we do that, we're going to make decisions, including hiring decisions and decisions on where we prioritize accordingly. And we will know how many psychiatrists and psychologists and social workers short we are. And I think we'll make some decisions about how we prioritize their hiring. I shared with you, Dr. Clancy, that we are at 89 FTEs, full-time equivalents in El Paso for mental health today, with 116 authorized and appropriated for, and we are at a 2 or 3 year low for mental health providers. And we know that care delayed becomes care denied and results in some tragic outcomes, including veteran suicide. So I want to use this forum again to ask that we prioritize that. Within this bill, I'm encouraged to see provisions for market pay. My only concern related to that is that perhaps in El Paso, which is not a rural area, but an underserved area, and then you have rural underserved areas, we may need to go far above market pay to get the number of psychiatrists, psychologists, behavioral health providers that we need. And so that would be a change that I would ask for. Pay whatever it costs to get the appropriate person. Understand that American medicine generally is having a hard time producing psychiatrists and psychologists and mental health specialists, but there are people in Manhattan who are able to go see a psychiatrist about their dog urinating on the carpet. There should be veterans who are able to, suffering from PTSD, who are able to see somebody immediately without any question. We just need to do whatever it takes. And Mr. Steyer, I have to tell you, I really appreciate your comments about this being perhaps the starter pistol. And what is really needed ultimately is accountability and oversight. And for the record, would love for you to tell us what you specifically recommend for that to ensure that we're following up on this. Because it can't just be, look, this stuff is hard. We can't hire these people. It's hard in American medicine. There have to be some consequences if there are new authorities and resources given to get the job done and to prevent veteran suicide and provide greater access for mental health. So sorry to make a speech and not ask as many questions, but I would like the direct answers to those questions I asked of you, Mr. Hernandez and Dr. Clancy.
We will get you that information expeditiously. I'm going to presume, just to clarify, that getting the full spectrum of people professionals who provide mental health care is what you would like, the social workers, psychologists, psychiatrists,
nurse
and so forth.
practitioners,
yes.
Everyone involved in the provision of that care so that we can connect veterans who need it, who aren't receiving it today. That's what I'm looking for.
We will get that to you expeditiously. I will also just insert for one moment that we are exercising all of the incentives that, thanks to the Congress, were provided in the Clay Hunt bill as well, because we agree with you, whatever it takes. This is an imperative. And one other thing, one of the Secretary's 12 breakthroughs actually does include a component on suicide. It is not explicit about the hiring piece, but to do it right, we've got to have the hiring piece as well. So that message has been heard.
Thank you.
Dr. Abraham.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thanks for this hearing. It's a great hearing. I'm going to pick up where Mr. O'Rourke left off. I thought his line of questioning was great. Mr. Hernandez, you said there was a 60-day period from when that applicant hits to when it's a job offer. What percentage of job offers that the VA extends are actually taken? What percentage of those physicians or nurses that come into the VA? Is it a 50%? Is it a 25%? So if you offer 100 positions, how many are taken by the applicants?
And sorry, but if I understand the question correctly, is out of the tentative job offers that we made, you want to know what percentage of those
accepted the
job
yes.
offer? I don't have that data with me.
Okay, if you could, I would appreciate that. I think that's an important. Do you know in 2015? Let's go to DOs and MDs, just physicians themselves. How many hires were made by the VA? Do you have that answer?
How many overall hires we did?
Sir. If you put MDs and DOs together, how many hires? Do you have that particular answer? And the reason I asked the question, you stated with Mr. O'Rourke's question that we had 43,000 open slots. I just wanted to see how many are being filled. And you can get back to me.
I'll get back with you.
I don't mean to put you on the spot. That's not my intent here. My intent is just to get something I can wrap my head around and get an answer. Dr. Clancy, I know with the credentialing board that the VA has, is there any difference in standards between the MDs, the DOs, the DPMs, all the NPs, the PAs? Is there pretty much standard operating procedure across the board as how they are graded before they are offered that job offer?
Yes, what takes time here is, like many institutions, we do primary source verification.
Right.
So we're not sort of taking someone's word for it, but yes.
Okay. Mr. Steyer, the figures that you have, do they agree with Dr. Hernandez as far as that 60-day? Well, I'm like Dr. Benechek. You know, I'm out in the district, and I'm talking to my docs that are trying to get into the VA system, and they say, you know, it's been over a year. So I just want to make sure we're all on the same page here. Do your figures go with what the VA is telling us here?
Two things. The first is that I don't have access to their direct hire information, so I have no independent sourcing. But I would say that what we've heard so far is a general number as opposed to the mission-critical positions that you're focused on, as I understand it, the doctors. So I think one of the interesting follow-up requests would be, can we get the information about time to hire for, you know, MDs or DOs so that you have the specific population you're interested in? And then I just would like to add again that time to hire is relevant, but at the end of the day, you can hire fast or slow. If you don't hire well, you've not done the job.
I totally agree
And
with
I think one of the things that this bill is important about is that it's going to also require some critical information around applicant satisfaction and hiring manager satisfaction. So asking both the population that's applying the job, what was experience like, and then the people who actually need the hires, did you get the talent that you actually wanted and relative to, you know, what you've been doing in the past. So those things are very important. I think you heard one other thing that was really critical here is the technology. You don't have an integrated HR system across the whole agency, so it's very hard to do the kind of work that you actually need to do in terms of comparing the information and holding folks accountable if you don't have that. So that would be another place where I think further exploration would help you know, understand how you can improve the situation. You know, we don't have, and again, VA is not alone. We don't have integrated HR platforms. It's a big mistake. Any other large organization that's well run in the private sector would have it, and it's a big problem in the government, and it's not the agencies. There's lots of room for blame around. So to fix it, I think this is a place that Congress could help.
Okay. Dr. Clement?
Congressman, if I may, I just wanted
Yes, sir, Mr.
one
Clement,
quick
please.
suggestion.
Yes, sir.
In order to identify the bottlenecks, I think one of the things that can be done is really take a look at the different segments in the hiring process. One of my biggest, I would say, complaints of how VA measures things is they select the start date, or they select the time in which they start measuring. And I think what's needed is to really take a look at every single segment of the hiring process from the time that someone has left that or that vacancy was created to the time that we get someone into that, and to fill that vacancy.
I understand. Good point. I yield back, Mr. Chairman. Thank you so much.
Ms. Titus, you're recognized.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. As we've had meetings over the last several years, you've heard me say many times that we need to not only focus on making it easier for the VA to discipline and dismiss employees, but also to recruit and retain the best employees. So I want to thank Dr. Benechek and also Dr. Winstrup and your staff for bringing this legislation forward and for including me and my staff in the process as you have drafted. We very much appreciate that. I hope also as we continue working on the bill that we'll include in it a legislation that Mr. Tucano and I have worked on to kind of continue something we started when we were doing the Choice Act, which was to increase the number of GMEs. We had that for 5 years. I hope we can extend that to 10 years because we've often heard that where you go to school and do your residency is where you stay and practice. And so that might also be something that helps with this problem. Mr. Steyer, your testimony presents some very compelling statistics that are pretty upsetting in terms of the retirement and the number of people who are going to be retiring and the number of people who think it's not a great place to work. And, you know, that seems to be a real challenge. But I think it also presents us an opportunity because with this many vacancies, it kind of dovetails with the Secretary's position of recreating the VA as my VA and making it more veteran-centric as opposed to agency-centric. And so I hope that we take advantage of the opportunity to broaden the kind of people we hire. You mentioned that we don't have enough young people coming into the program, and yet the number of young veterans is increasing. In my district, it's almost as equal to Vietnam veterans at this point, and I think that number will overtake the previous war veterans. Also, more women are now coming into the VA. LGBT issues are coming in. So I wonder if you're doing anything specifically to recruit these kinds of employees, or if there's anything we can do to help you kind of broaden the base of people who are coming to work for the VA who can better serve the special needs of our new and younger veterans. I don't know, we can start with anybody.
So I will say we have a center for the department and also an Office of Health Equity within VHA that reports directly to me that keeps a very close look on this, both not just to count numbers, which is one step, but actually to identify outreach opportunities and opportunities where we can encourage a very broad applicant pool. So I did want you to be aware of that. Obviously, as our affiliates in medical schools and so forth themselves become more diverse, that becomes a terrific, fertile recruiting ground, and one that we take very seriously. The Secretary has been in more medical schools than I think he ever thought possible, but he never misses an opportunity to go out on a recruiting opportunity for that.
Well, I'm glad to hear that, because women veterans often tell me they would prefer to see a woman doctor, but that there aren't many available. Some transgender veterans say there aren't many who kind of understand their special issues or can talk to them or relate to them. So I think the more diversity you have in your recruiting, the better. I didn't mean to cut you off. I'm sorry.
No, I was going to say that we are making a change in the very near future. All of our facilities, and I bet Dr. Banashek would know this, have an Our Doctors website, but right now you click off by the alphabet. So if I knew that I was looking for Banashek, I would click on B, right? But we're going to make it much easier for veterans to find information about physicians that they would be interested in. For example, if I want to see a woman physician, I can actually see a photo and things like that. And it'll be a lot more contemporary than our current sites.
Mr. Steyer, want to add to that?
The one thing that I hope you'll find germane is that there are a lot of good things that the VA is doing right now in terms on the execution side, but we're coming up obviously to an election here. And one of the big challenges in government agencies is good work gets started and then it gets interrupted because of the change in the leadership. Mm-hmm. And so I think that's an area that this committee could actually assist on in terms of trying to ensure at least two things, one of which is making sure that when there's an interruption of political leadership, that the agency actually has plans to carry forward the good things that are going on, and that this committee holds the next team accountable to carrying on the good work. So if there's some number of priorities that you want to see occurring, you get at them at the very front end. And we heard some discussion about the qualifications for medical centers. I would ask whether this committee will push on qualifications for leading the VA as well, because obviously it's a huge job, it's a huge transformation effort, and the kinds of folks that you get into those positions and the speed in which you get them there will be very important. So I'm kind of using your question for a little more, and I hope that's okay.
That's fine, I appreciate that. Just real briefly, when we talk about recruiting in underserved areas, we tend to focus on the rural areas, but some of our inner cities are also underserved. I know I represent the heart of Las Vegas, so let's keep that in mind as we move forward. Those areas can be underserved as well. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Dr. Ruiz, you're recognized.
Thank you. I would also like to start by saying thanks to the leadership of both the Health and Economic Opportunities subcommittees for holding this hearing and for continuing to include my legislation, H.R. 4150, as Section 3 of the discussion draft. The inclusion of other medical professionals other than emergency physicians will only continue to ensure veterans receive the efficient, effective, and continuous care that they deserve. By allowing schedulers and managers more flexibility, physicians and other care providers will be able to work schedules that are more beneficial to the patient and promote continuity of that care. However, I disagree with the VA's suggestion that the language of this section be amended to say, quote, is not less than, unquote, as opposed to, quote, does not exceed, quote. I'm concerned that requiring is not less than would likely lead to confusion and potential abuse within the department and ultimately deter medical professionals from seeking employment within the VA. Look, the point is to match scheduling and work practices with the private sector in the emergency department and other shift-like work, like hospitalists, who sometimes work a light shift week for maybe 1 or 2 weeks, and then resume with a very heavy shift work week for 1 or 2 weeks. That could be more or less than a specified number. So the idea is flexibility, not to create a rigid, concrete amount as the change in language would signify. So I urge my colleagues to keep this in mind as we continue to develop this discussion draft into legislation. And I look forward to continue the discussion around Section 3 and the discussion draft as a whole. Let me ask you a question, Dr. Clancy. Does the VA have a physician shortage that mimics the general population physician shortage?
Yes.
Okay. And
particularly primary care and mental health. I mean, those are tough for us. We got ahead of the curve briefly for mental health for the whole system, but because so few students are choosing those career paths, that becomes a rate limiter, and with mental health parity for the rest of the population.
How do you measure that? How do you know, in the United States, we have the medically recommended number of 1 physician per 2,000, and to be medically underserved, it's 1 to 3,500. What's the recommendation for physicians within the VA, and how do you measure it? Is it per population? Is it per catchment area population of veterans? How many physicians per veteran population is your goal?
I don't think that we have a physicians per veteran population for the goal, which would be a bit tricky.
Do you think we should have one?
We would be happy to explore that with you further. The issues are that not all veterans in a particular area are enrolled in our system, and some who are enrolled use our system for some services, but not all.
How do you determine need, and how do you determine physician shortage need within specific VISNs, within specific VA healthcare systems?
We determine that by how easy it is for veterans to get their needs met. That is literally veterans who report that they usually or always can get the care that they need or want in a timely way, literally. And we actually look very closely, as Dr. Wenstrup knows, I'm sorry he's not here because we've been over this with him a lot, in terms of physician productivity, and are we providing the right infrastructure support so that they can be as productive as possible. So it's a very dynamic.
So where do you recruit these physicians where you have these unfilled vacancies and this physician shortage needs? Where's your best place to recruit them? And is the military a fruitful place for you to recruit not only physicians or residents, or maybe perhaps even pre-meds from the medic community into the medical school and then into your residency programs and ultimately into your VA?
I don't know if we have statistics on that. I will ask Mr. Hernandez in a second. I want to assure you that there is absolutely no source that we don't turn to, whether that's the military, our affiliates, and the students who rotate through our facilities are a very good source. And
my specialty, as you know, is emergency medicine, and I do have public health background and public policy background with my educational training, but my on-the-ground effort has been to address a physician shortage crisis and how to create pipeline programs from very difficult, underserved, hard-to-reach communities where you lack physicians, take students from those communities into medical schools, into residencies, back into those communities. So I want to be able to better define the problems that you're having using some real analytical tools rather than qualitative tools or maybe inaccurate tools of wait times, so that we can better match the need with the source, or maybe even create a pipeline program from pre-med medics into medical schools that feed the VA residency programs and into ultimately staying in the VA healthcare system.
We would be delighted to work with you on that.
Let's work on that.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Ruiz. Well, I just want to, I think that pretty much it for the questions, but just wanted to make one more comment that I've been thinking about through the whole hearing here, and it's something that since I worked within the VA and I speak to a lot of VA physicians, and it's not something that we really addressed here in this legislation or the hearing, but my feeling is that with speaking to many physicians, that they do not have enough input in the way the processes that the VA does to make where they feel as if they're doing things as well as they could. And some of your comments with Dr. Wenstrup touched on it a little bit, but you know, my experience is that the physicians feel as if they're being, you know, not being as efficient as possible because they don't have enough input in the way things are done. Because there's just seems like there's a nursing, the nursing departments that decides how the clinics are run, and the physicians may not have enough input there. And I would, in order to make it a competitive place to recruit physicians, they need to have the input to feel as if they're doing a good job, because I know things are changing in medicine where more and more physicians end up working for a big organization because you can't do it. But you know, you have to compete with the private sector, and I think that you really need to work on that issue, because many of the physicians are very frustrated within the VA, and that the whole culture there needs to have physician leadership and communication with the medical director and the staff, the physicians on staff, or a visit to VA is an important part of that. So I want to encourage you to make that happen a little easier. So thank you all for being here again today. If anyone has any other questions, the panel is now excused. I ask unanimous consent that all members have 5 legislative days to revise and extend their remarks and include extraneous material. Without objection, so ordered. This hearing is now adjourned.